This is Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Michael or Mike Dames. Mike started his marketing career in corporate America. From there, he went into education at all levels, behavior specialist and special education teacher in elementary and middle schools, as well as a high school administrator. Mike is currently the director for Hope Worldwide Charlotte. This organization's goal is to improve the lives of people in poverty. He's committed to helping community and school leaders design programs that create effective schools and sustainable communities and help people transition out of poverty. So, welcome, Michael Dames.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mike, you grew up in situational poverty, which must contribute to your effectiveness in working with others to transition out of poverty. How did your early life affect who you are today?
Well, I never thought that I'd be doing what I've been doing since 2003 with the AHA process. And it all kind of started when I met Ruby Payne in one of her workshops. But I had never read her research or didn't even know seen a picture of it. But once she started talking, I knew she knew what she was talking about because a lot of the scenarios that she described, I had actually lived. But she's the first person that I ever met that could link research and pedagogy with the subject matter. And that's sort of how our friendship began. But because I grew up in situational poverty, I understand the hidden rules of that world. I also understand what motivates a lot of the choices and decisions. So it enables me just to be a little bit more empathetic and non-judgmental when I see it. And I think that by them talking to someone who's been in a similar situation or same scenario as theirs, it gives them hope.
You can be the role model.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it.
Tell me about Hope Worldwide Charlotte. What does it do? Who do you serve? How does it make a difference in lives?
Well, Hope is a faith-based nonprofit, and we're an international organization. And the letters HOPE stand for helping other people everywhere. So here in our community, we're known as the blue shirt people. And we have a lot of expertise in mobilizing volunteers swiftly, and we plug in to assist in our community wherever we're needed. We do a lot with the American Red Cross, and we're involved in blood drives for them, but we also get heavily involved in disaster relief. Other areas that we focus on are the homeless population, and we serve our homeless populations through different shelters here in Charlotte that are providing programming and transitional space for men and women that have been homeless.
So, Mike, does Hope actually operate those shelters, or do you refer people, or how does it work?
Okay, that's a good question. We partner with other agencies in our organization that have the physical infrastructure. And we come in and we provide services or we provide volunteers to work side by side and to augment what they're doing. Now, we do have the signature programs that I'm using in my community are signature programs from AHA Process. We use Bridges Out of Poverty here in my community, and we also sponsor Getting Ahead groups, small groups. So those would be considered our signature programs under HOPE.
Tell me about Bridges Out of Poverty.
Well, Bridges Out of Poverty provides communities with a common language that enables them to convene a cross section of the community, the different sectors that make up the community, and to have a productive discussion about whatever problems that particular community may be dealing with. It also introduces them to the research continuum so that they can learn the truth about the root causes of poverty. It also helps them to see value add in approaching, dealing with, or addressing any problem in their community from a community-wide approach. It's not just the individual that may be suffering or impacted from the problem that's responsible for making changes, but the institutions that are there to provide support, as well as the community at large, which would be your community leaders and your policymakers, have to be willing to listen to the research as well, and everybody needs to be willing to change in order to improve the situation. We refer to this concept called the triple lens, viewing economic class through the triple lens. And basically what that teaches communities to do is to identify what your favorite lens is, but to understand that if the research says that there are 4 root causes, if your program designs and your interventions only address one of those root causes, then you shouldn't be surprised if you're not seeing the number of people in poverty in your community reduce. So it really equips them to plan more effectively and to drill down a little bit deeper and to come up with program designs and interventions that will address all 4 of those root causes. And once we can get buy-in from a community at that level, that community is well on its way to becoming a sustainable community. And a sustainable community, Nan, is one where all of the individuals as well as the institutions in the community have access to what we refer to as 11 required resources. And these 11 required resources add stability to all human life. So when we come in and we're sharing this research, we're talking about the community-wide approach, we're talking about the research continuum, and we're introducing them to these 11 required resources and defining them. Now they have a much broader perspective to approach the subject of poverty at. And they're able to take their existing programs to the next level. Often they're able to innovate and to do things with this research that nobody else across the country is doing. But it's really quite interesting to see what people are able to do with Bridges Out of Poverty as a result of it being so flexible and being so adaptable.
So tell me what the 11 required resources are, or some of them anyway.
That's a good question. When you talk about poverty, most of the time, the resource that people think is the primary cause of someone being in poverty would be financial resources. But what you discover when you're exposed to the Bridges research is that there are actually 11, and financial resources is just one. So now that means that you could have plenty of money, but still be in poverty. There are financial resources, physical resources, mental resources, spiritual resources. Do you have relationships and role models? Are you knowledgeable of the hidden rules of economic class? Do you understand a formal register, the language of choice for schools and businesses, the language of negotiation? Okay, and those are just an examples of some of those required resources. Also under those 11 required resources would be things like integrity and motivation. Okay, is your yes a yes and your no a no? Do you see the choices and decisions you're making problematic, and are you willing to do what you need to do to experience something different? And that would be how we define motivation. So as you can see, it's a lot broader than most people have thought. And we define poverty as to the extent that the individual, the institution, or the community has access to those 11 resources.
That's really interesting. You also help on prison reform. In other words, people getting out of prison and how to rehouse, et cetera. Do you get involved in that at all?
I'm not in my community, but I know from doing the Getting Ahead cohorts that 2 of the biggest barriers for a lot of men and women that are in poverty are employment and housing. And when I say housing, I'm talking about affordable housing. Once they go through the Getting Ahead process and they learn about financial literacy, and they're usually introduced to that after they graduate from Getting Ahead, they start dreaming about home ownership, because most people know that when you're trying to build wealth, the best way to do that in America is by owning a home. So it's something that we're familiar with. That would be next level for us here in the Charlotte community, is to start working with men and women that have been previously incarcerated and introducing them to the brand new curriculum that Phil Duvall has just come out with called Getting Ahead While Getting Out.
You enjoy helping people from really all economic classes, then, from your description, gain those skills to learn and then be able to better interact and serve and relate to one another, which is certainly something we need today. Discussion, communication, relating to each other with the divide that we have. What techniques do you use that relate back to communication?
Well, Nan, let me make sure I understand your question. And yes, you're reading me right. I do take what I do very serious, and I kind of see it as a ministry because prior to meeting Ruby Payne, I'd never given much thought to how I was able to get out of poverty when some of my friends and family did not. So by being exposed to her research, it kind of helped me to connect a lot of dots in my own life. But I'm a firm believer that the vibe that you give off in this life is what you get back. And I'm a firm believer that in spite of what a lot of people may be saying, is that there are enough resources to meet the needs of all of the human beings that are on the planet Earth. And I really believe that teaching people that when you encounter someone that gives you pause, it's typically because they're functioning with a different set of hidden rules than you are. Okay. And as a result of that, you're thinking that there's something wrong with them, and they're having the same conversation in their head. When in essence, what has happened is that two people who come from different economic classes have just collided because they're navigating the environment that they're coexisting with a different set of hidden rules. So when we come into a community and we break this down for them and we start talking about these hidden rules, that's an aha moment for a lot of our audience. Now, a hidden rule is nothing more than an unspoken cue that lets me know whether or not you grew up in the same economic class that I did. And we all have these hidden rules, and wherever we go, we take them right along with us. And then we all believe that our hidden rules are the best. So when we walk into an environment and we run into somebody who has the same hidden rules, it's easier for us to build a relationship with them and be willing to coexist. The problem occurs is when you run into someone whose hidden rules are different. But once you understand these hidden rules, now it doesn't matter where you go and who you're interacting with. There's not too much that they can do or say that's going to give you pause or to get or to take you off your game. You may see someone make a choice or decision that's different from yours, but because you understand it, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. They've just figured out how to get from point A to point B a different way than I would. I can resist the temptation to judge them. It's when we're judging the choices of others that we see that don't match ours. It's when those relational conflicts can occur. Does that make sense?
It does. In fact, it reminds me very much of someone that I interviewed not very long ago from Iceland. And
Okay.
her name is Runa Magnus.
Okay.
You said that right. And she talks about how we tend to put people in boxes, think
Mm,
in boxes. In other words, our perceptions, our rules, whatever you want to call it, how we come from those boxes that we have put together for our life.
hmm.
And I think you'd really be interested in listening to her interview as well.
Okay.
And there's a book from her too, because we all need everything we can find in resources. We talk about 11 resources, but we need a lot of resources total. That's just categories. We have lots of things under though each one of those.
Yeah. And here's the bottom line. Wherever you are, you're coexisting with people that have come from varying backgrounds, diverse backgrounds. So the people in the 21st century that are the most effective are the ones that can be intentional about building relationships with all people, regardless to the economic class that they're living in or came from, regardless to their gender, their generation, or their race or their culture or their political affiliation. You're able to agree to disagree and to have a civil conversation without being disrespectful. And what we found at AHA Process is that when you operate that way, you can go anywhere and be successful. So that's what we try to teach our audience. And that's what we try to teach the men and women that are in poverty, that are going through getting ahead to get out, to equip them so that they can be successful in any environment that they're navigating in. We believe that all hidden rules have value. Okay. You just have to figure out what the hidden rules are of the environment that you're in right now and to know when to switch hats. And when the rules that you grew up with don't serve you based on where you are right now, once again, you just switch hats. It's not about selling out or trying to be somebody that you're not, but it's about learning how to be successful in navigating where you are at the moment to get your needs met.
And having a civil discussion is
Yes.
something that is needed so much today.
Yes. We talk a lot about mutual respect in our research. And mutual respect is nothing more than the golden rule. I'm going to treat you the way I want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And we believe that if you do that, like I said, it doesn't matter, where you came from, people are going to give back to you what you're giving to them.
Well, how do you help community and school leaders design programs to create effective schools and communities?
Well, in the school settings, we go in and we work with the administrators and central office and also the teachers and paraprofessionals. And we talk about the importance of building relationships centered around mutual respect. Typically, the students that are most challenging for today's teacher are students that are coming from under-resourced households. Okay, so we not only teach them about the importance of having the relationship centered around mutual respect, which means that in the school setting, high expectations, but being willing to provide the support that each student needs, combined with utilizing hidden rules to deliver instruction. But we also teach them about the hidden rules of economic class and to help them to see that some of the students that have been most challenging to them probably came from a different economic class than they had, but they need to value their hidden rules, but they need to be willing to teach them the hidden rules of school. Okay. Now, when I'm working with community leaders, it's all about helping them to see that there is a time and a place when you just simply give a person resources. But if that's all you're doing, their situation never changes. So what we're proposing with Bridges is that, when they are in a situation when they need food or they need housing, and that's the immediate need, and I'm talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you've got to meet that first. There may be some other issues they need to deal with. There may be addiction issues. There may be you name it, domestic violence or whatever, but that may have to be stabilized first. But now, if you have a relationship with them and you can introduce them to some new knowledge that enables them to figure out how they can apply this research to their lives to improve their situation, you've got something that you can work with. And the beauty of our work is that by equipping the men and women in most of these communities that are receiving public assistance with this information, is that while they're going through this process, no one's telling them what their problem is. We're sharing the information, they're connecting the dots, they're exploring, okay, and they're figuring out how they can use this information to improve their situations. But the game changer is when we explain those 11 resources and we define them, and then they do a resource analysis on themselves. Now they've quantified their strengths and their weaknesses, and they also develop some SMART goals. They decide which resource in their life is absent or too low and which one they want to start building first. They put together a SMART plan, something that's specific, it's measurable, it's obtainable, it's got a timeline associated with it. And along with developing the SMART goals, they develop a concrete plan with steps so that if they choose to act on it, Nan, is basically the beginning of their new future story. If they act on that plan, they learn that they can do the same thing that I did. They can change the trajectory of their life by sticking with the plan that they've developed and developing the resources that were low or absent that caused their life to be unstable. So what communities see is that, okay, well, if I do that, then that means that it's less expensive for me, because instead of just giving people money and giving them resources, I do that for a while, but then I expose them to this information, and now they learn that they can start doing it for themselves. So that's what gets a lot of communities so excited about our research.
What I really like about it, Mike, is that you're dealing with the total person. You know,
Yes.
all my life I have worked in subsidized housing one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Maslow's basic need. Okay. But it never is the answer, because the answer is really the total person. And
Yes.
you're dealing with that so much better than what we have dealt with all our lives, just simply trying to provide the basic need of shelter. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much more to it. And I'm so happy to hear that you're doing it. I mean, that's great. Another question is, do people then have a lot more buy-in to the end result because they have actually helped design the program for themselves?
Absolutely. Most human beings are reluctant to sabotage their own plan. Now, if I come in and I'm treating you like you're an idiot, and because I've got all these accolades, I'm gonna just tell you what your problem is and then tell you what to do. And then when I come back and follow up with you, be surprised that you didn't do it, which is what, sad to say, a lot of communities are doing. But the reason that the participants buy in is because for the first time in their lives, they're being treated with mutual respect. No middle class person is standing up in front of them telling them what to do, but as they explore, you ask, so where would you like to start? How do you feel about what you've discovered now that you've assessed yourself? Which one of the resources do you feel like are low or absent? Which one would you like to build first? Okay, now that's their plan. And my experience has been that when human beings develop their own plan, since now they've got skin in the game, they're a lot more motivated to put action behind those goals and to go after it.
Well, and there's one more thing, and I think, and that is that if you hand somebody a plan for them to carry out, but they don't help design it, then if it doesn't work, it's like your fault.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the cool thing that people see with the Bridges Out of Poverty research is this. It's very inclusive. We believe that people from all walks of life in all economic classes have value and inherently are problem solvers, and that communities that are striving to be sustainable, a community where all of the citizens have access to those 11 resources, you want to invite all of those entities into the conversation on the front end. Okay. We believe that men and women that are living in poverty are some of the smartest people in your communities, because think about it for a moment. If you're surviving in poverty, you have to be extremely intelligent. Okay, so we need to start tapping into that intelligence in our communities and getting their voice and their suggestions in the front end before we start developing all of these programs without their input.
Let me ask you just one last question, and that is, what is the biggest challenge you see for national leaders today?
The biggest challenge for national leaders today, truth be told, is having the humility to evaluate the effectiveness of what they've been doing. And once they do that evaluation, if it's broke, being willing to admit that it's broke and to try to fix it.
I think that's a great analysis. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your time and for kind of explaining what you're doing in these resources to us, which just sounds really interesting. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.